Hello and welcome to Excellence Noir. Today we are talking about George Moses Horton. He is the first Black American author to be published in the United States. He was known as the slave poet. George was born into slavery on William Horton's plantation in about 1798 in Northampton County, North Carolina. He was the sixth of 10 children. The names of his parents are unknown. From an early age, he displayed remarkable intellectual ability despite being denied formal education. George began an interest in learning to read and write by listening to the Bible read aloud and the hymns he heard. He began compiling pieces based on the verses that he remembered from the King James Version of the Bible. In the early 1820s, George was taken to the area around Chapel Hill near the University of North Carolina. There he began composing and selling love poems to university students, gaining local recognition for his talent. His reputation attracted the attention of white patrons and academics who recognized his literary skill, though they did not assist in securing his freedom. Caroline Lee Hintz, author and playwright, also took an interest in George, teaching him to write and to improve his verses. Teaching blacks to read and write was legal in North Carolina until 1836, when restrictions were imposed because of fears about slave revolts. In 1829, George achieved a historic milestone with the publication of The Hope of Liberty, making him the first enslaved Black American to publish a book of poetry and the first Black poet to publish a poetry collection in the American South. Many poems in this volume directly addressed slavery, liberty, and intellectual equality. Throughout the 1830s and 1840s, George continued writing and advocating for his freedom through poetry. Sometime in the 1830s, he married Martha Snipes, and during that time in North Carolina, legal marriages were not permitted. Martha was enslaved and owned by Franklin Snipes there in Chatham County, North Carolina. Upping the broom tradition comes from because the slaves weren't legally to marry in many places throughout the U.S. during that time. And so slaves would jump over the broom to indicate a legal marriage. The couple had 2 children named Free and Rhodey. Little else is known about the family. Twice George attempted to have others aid in his freedom. In 1844, he wrote a letter to abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison. And in 1852, he wrote another letter to Horace Greeley, the editor of the New York Daily Tribune, a poem titled A Poet's Feeble Petition, which expressed his longing for freedom. And as I was researching this, it made me think about James Hemings and how he longed for freedom. And that was just a quest for him to get his freedom throughout his life. And I'm sure that's the story of many enslaved people. Neither letter reached their recipient due to the messenger George trusted, not passing the letters along and basically throwing them away. And that was so foul, so foul. In 1845, he published the poetical works of George M. Horton, which expanded his audience and included autobiographical poems expressing his prolonged bondage and frustration at remaining enslaved despite his achievements. During this period, George gradually learned to write, though he continued to rely heavily on dictation and memorization. His poetry remained rooted in classical forms and moral reflection rather than overt political confrontation. At age 60, around 1858, he described himself as belonging to Hal Horton, now living in Chatham County, North Carolina. So I took that as George saying that this is my plight. I'm never going to see freedom, which I've longed for all my life. In 1865, following the end of the Civil War, George was finally emancipated at approximately 67 years old, having spent nearly his entire life in slavery. And that's just really sad that it took so long for George to finally be free. It takes me back to James Hemings and how he longed for freedom nearly his entire life. And that by the time that he received freedom, he had such a short time to enjoy it before he died. That same year, he published Naked Genius, reflecting on freedom, loss, and survival in the aftermath of emancipation. George continued to write poetry for local newspapers, and his poem, Forbidden to Ride on the Streetcars, expressed his disappointment in the unjust treatment of blacks after emancipation. Arriving in Philadelphia before the summer of 1866, he wrote Sunday school stories on behalf of friends who lived in the city. Disappointed with the racial discrimination he encountered in Philadelphia, George immigrated to Bexley, Liberia, arriving January 7th of 1867. This is the last known reference to him, while later death dates are found in some recent publications. His death location, date, and burial are unknown. He may have returned to Philadelphia, but no one knows for sure. George Moses Horton's life proves that brilliance can survive even under bondage. Enslaved and largely self-taught, he became the first Black American to publish a book of poetry in the South and the first enslaved person in the U.S. to do so. Writing first in his mind, George used poetry as both survival and quiet resistance, challenging racist ideas about Black intellect. His legacy endures as a cornerstone of Black American literary history. And thank you so much for watching.